I wasn't supposed to start my first real shift until Friday. But the backcountry office at Mammoth runs on the kind of clock that cares more about weather patterns than calendars. On Tuesday, the storm that had been sitting over the Absarokas shifted. The radios popped to life, and I found myself standing under a flickering fluorescent light while a senior ranger handed me a binder thick enough to qualify as ballast. "Uniform's fine," she said, flipping to a laminated divider labeled Field Ops, Thermal. "We'll worry about perfect later. Read the bold, don't improvise, and keep the radio on your shoulder, not in your pack. If you need to sound brave on the net, you're probably already behind." Her name was Ro. Her sleeves were rolled up, forearms freckled and scarred. Not dramatically the kind of nicks you collect when you spend 20 years convincing tourists not to kick the earth. She snapped a card off a ring and slid it across the desk with 2 fingers. "Your backcountry, but we get drafted for thermal confirms more than is polite. People fall in, people touch things, dogs." She caught my expression and softened it. "It's not all but. Sometimes it's noise. Sometimes it's nothing." The card was laminated and soft on the edges, like it had been rubbed against sweat and maps for a decade. On the front, YELLBC Night, Reissue 7, under that, unmistakably. Instructions that were rules, but written with the quiet apology of someone who knew what it felt like to be new. If steam crosses the trail and you cannot smell sulfur or minerals, do not step through. If you hear your name spoken outside of visual contact after civil twilight, do not respond verbally. Key the radio for 2 seconds, wait, then say "Ranger" on air. Nothing else. If you find coins, jewelry, or teeth on any boardwalk, do not bag them. Use the scraper. Return to the truck report. If you see an unmapped trail junction after 2,100 hours, turn back to the last marked intersection. Leave a branch in the fork pointing back. If you cannot find a branch, use your hat if a bison blocks your path and it does not animate when you clap or speak loudly. You are not looking at a bison. Walk backwards without speaking. Remember 1, 2, 3. Do not run. If you count more than 7 stars inside the Big Dipper, wait until morning. If your radio tests fail, but your GPS shows movement you did not make, find a river. Follow it downstream. Do not use bridges after midnight. If you meet a ranger you do not know and they do not introduce themselves with call sign and favorite trail, do not give your name. Ask for the weather. If they say clear, walk away. On the back, in smaller writing, someone had penned in ballpoint, "If you're on the black sand boardwalk and you hear gazebo music, lie flat. It's more for you than us," Ro said, catching me reading that last line twice. "They'll show you the standard visitor. Safety talk down in the bear den. That's the one you'll say so often, you'll hear it when you brush your teeth. This one is the one I will deny exists when you quote it back. What's the gazebo music? Ask me after your second week," she said. Which is Ranger for never. They did the issue bear spray. Radio with a stubby antenna and a dust plug I was told not to lose. A DeLorme Inrich clipped to a belt I still hadn't figured out how to thread through the new pants. A med kit I'd loaded with my own blister pads. The dispatcher tested me on radio etiquette, and I said all the words I had memorized while being a seasonal in a smaller park. Plain English. Say location first. Say it twice if the net's busy. Do not code. Sound like you are describing something to an 8-year-old who will be writing it down. I drove out in a truck that smelled like wet dog and coffee, and road dust that wouldn't leave the vents. The sticker on the dashboard read Ranger 278. The first patrol was small pullouts at Norris, an evening look at the porcelain basin, a sweep of the boardwalks for the kind of unsupervised miracles who think they were born to test physics. I walked with my hand on my radio and that laminated card pressed into the breast pocket where, if I leaned forward, it warmed like a second heartbeat. There are signs everywhere in the thermal basins. They're repetitive on purpose because the human brain is a toddler on a sugar crash around blue water. Stay on boardwalk, scalding water, thin crust. I had to stop 2 kids from trying to dip their fingers in a bubbling pothole while their mother FaceTimed a man who wanted to see the real geysers, not the tourist ones. I don't blame them. The holes look cool and slow, the color gracious at the edges. They do not look like they will eat your legs the way lie eats pork. At a junction, a maintenance tech in waders waved to me from down off the boardwalk, ankle deep in a channel that ran the color of weak tea. He had a measuring stick and a coil of cable over one shoulder. "You knew," he called. "Is it that obvious?" He grinned and tipped his hard hat, the smile cut off cleanly at its edges. No leftover warmth, just the performance of a smile. "Watch your head after dark," he said. "Porcelain gets fog when the temperature drops. People step off because they think they're on a cloud. There's an extra rope in the box at the south gate. Might save your knees." "Thanks," I said. "Hey, what's your butt?" He had already turned, and the steam swallowed him with a whispering hiss. I watched the place where he'd been for a long breath that lasted 3 heartbeats, then checked that the red tag on the south box was still in place. It was. The rope inside sat in a coil like a harmless snake. The lock that sealed the gate when the boardwalk was closed had been oiled. The hand-lettered sign on the lid said "Check before you beckon." Back at the truck, I wrote it all down. That's the job, actually. They tell you it's wilderness, but the park is mapped like a city and managed like a hospital. I wrote maintenance tech, porcelain, 1740, cable, waiters, and then the little detail he had given me, might save your knees. The radio pinged when a group on the other side of the park reported a grizzly near a carcass. That was law enforcement's problem. Mine was more subtle, the steadiness of the truck, the light draining toward the ridgeline, the way my breath hung off the rearview mirror when I leaned forward as twilight came down the slope at 20:35. A voice said my name from the passenger seat. I had the radio in my hand before I remembered the card. I didn't smell sulfur. I wasn't in steam. The dome light hadn't flicked on. The name came again, like it had been sewn into the upholstery. I keyed the radio for 2 seconds. The little green light flickered, and the net hissed like breath between teeth. "Ranger on air," I said. My own voice sounded like it came from across the parking lot. Nothing for a heartbeat. Nothing for 2. And then dispatch in that calm Cook City accent. "Ranger 278, good copy." I swallowed and rested the radio against my chest until the raw into my ear stopped burning. I did not say my name. I did not look into the passenger seat. I didn't lock the doors. Either another note from the trainings. Locked doors mean you have to fumble with keys. Unlocked doors, if you're moving, mean you can swing yourself in when something changes its mind fast. There are patterns you don't learn until you have been somewhere long enough for your scent to sink into the hallways. The first week, I was spared the worst. There were wolves playing magnets with a herd of elk down in the Hayden, so we got called down there more than was polite to. People block the road to take pictures. They shock their cars forward when the wolves dart to the other shoulder. They cry when the wolves disappear into the timber. You tell them to move along. They nod and don't. You write plates down as if you'll remember them if the situation comes back around on Friday. Roe slid a second card across a different desk in the backcountry office. This one wasn't laminated. It was a torn page from a field notebook, the lines dotted instead of solid, and the edges stained with coffee. Volunteer in thermal, had a day at black sand, she said. He's okay. He wrote this when he came back in. Put it with the other one. Do not check the truth of any line in it on purpose, it said. Do not count geyser cycles in your head. If you do, don't say the number out loud. Do not stop if you see a fox on the boardwalk. You didn't. Foxes don't like steam. If you smell flowers at night, go uphill. Whatever you hear, don't follow it downhill. If you come to a place with two boardwalks side by side, take the left unless the bollard on the right has 3 bolts. Not 2. If a raven hops over your boot and looks left, look right. If you meet a group in matching ponchos moving shoulder to shoulder so their hoods touch like one big hood, step off the boardwalk and let them pass. If you can see mouths, cover your own. If you can't, close your eyes. If you hear gazebo music, lie flat. The roof can't see you if you're a floor. There are rules that look like folklore when you write them down. They don't taste like science. But the park isn't a lab. It's a slipped place, and the slipping happens on a scale of inches and decades. Water has memory and hunger, and a sense of humor so bad it curves back around to terrifying. When tourists ask why they can't take a piece of obsidian home, we tell them it's theft of heritage. We don't say it's a splinter of a mirror, and every mirror turns to face something eventually. I took the black sand note because I had the porcelain patrol again on Sunday night. The sky did the thing it was doing that summer, where it went from blue to black, like someone took a knife to the horizon and tipped it. I parked at the south gate, signed the orange log with time and call sign, tugged at the padlock on the chain just to feel the weight of it, and stepped onto wood that had been planed by countless deliberate feet. Steam lifts differently in the dark. It stands up and tries to remember your shape. It clings if you let it. The first pula pole on postcards, whale skin up close heaved like someone under a sheet. I kept the beam of my headlamp low because moths wanted to set their faces on fire, and because eyes come back at you if you give them a reason. The boardwalk creaked in a not unpleasant way. It is held together with screws that catch light like moth-wing scales. I heard the song at 2112. It was exactly what the note said. Gazebo music, not a genre. A location, the plank of something stringed, played without urgency. The high shiver of metal, like a triangle struck with no one to look up. The smell was floral and wrong for altitude, not physical flowers. But the idea that someone poured a bottle, labeled Heirloom Garden, into the air, I lay flat. It felt like a prank. It felt like the inverse of what an adult does on patrol. I lay flat anyway, because my job was not to curate my dignity. The wood pressed up against my sternum, the breath shudder shook the beam of my headlamp. And as the music passed, because that is what it did, it passed, the heat went away where it moved. Not cold, not chill, just the absence of warmth, like a shadow of the opposite of a thing. When it had faded, when the owl that had been quiet started to make itself known again, I rolled and breathed the handrail. It smelled like damp and like oil. I counted the bolts on the nearest bollard, because that is what my hands did when my brain was busy pretending this was a day job, and then I remembered that the note had line for 2 bolts. I kept the left track when it split as we went by the outflow, and I did not test it, and that is important. I did not test it because tests are small invitations, and things that have expensive answers love to be invited. At 21:40, my radio crackled, and a voice I hadn't met yet said, 278, you on the porcelain board? Affirmative, I said, relief, cheap and huge in my throat. South to north, copies. Watch your footing by the top loop. We had frost heave after last week's storm. The voice was older and had the rasp that comes from cigarettes or from nights. You get special rules from Roe yet. I got a card, a chuckle. Keep it in your left pocket. You want them on your heart when it's bright, and on your other when it's not. Who is this? Ranger 161, he said. They call me Calloway. Favorite trail is Mist Creek if the bugs are down. If they aren't, the CDT. I liked the rhythm of it. The test that wasn't a test. To highlight in the shoulder seasons. I like losing my way without getting lost. You won't do much of that here, he said. It's all losing your way while everyone watches. Hey, listen. I stopped on the boardwalk, 1 foot forward, the other backward, the post shift creeping into my arches. Do you hear your name? The boardwalk creaked. A bubble popped in the basin, the wet clap of something that had forgotten what it was like to be ice. Far off, a group on the main road cheered at nothing, likely their own headlights clearing a bend. No, I said. Should I? I want you to imagine yourself hearing it, he said. I want you to hear in your head exactly how your mother says it. Sit with that for me. I did. It surprised me that I could summon it. I'd been trying not to, by habit and by training. I thought of the way she put a question in the middle, the way my name in her mouth contained the word sweetie even when it wasn't there. My headlamp made the steam look like it was holding still. Now, Calloway said, you feel how it pulls your chest forward. That's the line. That's the current. Don't step into that on purpose. Do you understand me? There are many things that make you feel like a child in your first month. I said yes. I put my hand over the pocket with the card in it. It snowed in August. Not unheard of, but startling enough that the elk stopped pretending to ignore us and lifted their heads in unison, like we'd said something in a language they mostly forgot. I was in the truck at hour 5 of my shift when a call came over for a medical in the Upper Geyser Basin. A visitor, mid-40s, light-headed on the boardwalk, wife afraid he was going to faint. No waiters, no techs, just a sick man and a tooth and railing above a hot blue hole. I'm 10 minutes out, I said. Turnover. Tower says they're both upright, no signs of fall. Wife is making good choices. They're near the big one. The big one meant a lot of things. Around Old Faithful, the biggest thing is the crowd. You don't feel comfortable working in it because bodies are not infrastructure. They are unpredictable obstacles that want to be thrilled. I parked illegally, waved cheerfully, and went fast without running. A kid stepped backward, and I had to put a hand on his shoulder and then on the rail to avoid dropping half my weight into a light green pool that smelled like temper tantrums. He was pale. He wasn't fainting. He had taken his sunglasses off and was squinting like the light hurt him. His wife had given up on speaking quietly and was doing what people do when panic makes muscles look for tasks. She was adjusting his collar and smoothing his hair and giving me medical history I did not ask for. I asked for it anyway. He had been standing on the bench, she said, to see the other geyser. And then he had said, "It's saying my name," and then he had gone quiet. His pupils were pinned. The skin at the base of his throat trembled. "You hear it now?" I asked, keeping my voice soft. "Sir, you listen to me. Do not nod. I want you to look at my hand and count to 10 with me. In your pocket, though, count in your pocket." He looked at my hand. His wife squeezed his arm. I saw the number flicker across his face and then die. "Ranger 278, on scene," I said into my shoulder. "Male, 40, conscious, oriented to name, not place. They're near Beehive. He says the water is saying his name." "Copy," dispatch said. "EMS en route." Sometimes the job is being the lifeguard at a magic show. The park does things that look like illusions, and you keep your hands on the stage so people don't lean into the trick. I asked him to sit. He did. I asked him not to look at the sloping lip of xerosite salt that made the edge of the pool so uninvitingly smooth. He looked. "Listen to me," I said. "I know the voice you hear has a name. It's not yours. It's a name you call yourself. Don't answer it. Do you understand?" He blinked at me. The steam from the pool shivered like a creature dreaming of something it wanted to chase. "Answer your wife," I said. "Not the water." "I just wanted to see," he murmured. "I know," I said. "Me too." EMS came. We did vital signs and asked the man to look at the sky and not notice the way the timing shorted in his shoulders. He cried, without moving the muscles of his face, when the med tech said, "You're okay," in the voice of someone who has earned the right to say that and doesn't waste it. After, when the crowd had exhaled us back into the truck and the white van with the blue star had driven away, I stood in the parking lot with the feel of my hand on the rail still living in my palm, and Ro came over with a cardboard tray of coffees that had names written on their plastic lids in permanent marker. She handed me one that said "new" and put her boot up on the bumper. "Sometimes they're just tired and dehydrated," she said. "Sometimes there's something else." She picked at the peel-off lid on her coffee with a thumbnail and then sighed and let it be. "That's the worst thing," she said. "Sometimes they are something else, and then they aren't. Imagine someone grabbing your pocket for 20 seconds and then letting go. You'll think your jeans want to walk without you for the rest of the day. What's the worst thing? That the pocket is where your wallet is," she said. "So you spend the day checking if what you are is still in there." They sent me on my first overnight 3 weeks in Shoshone Basin. Go in from the south, up past Lone Star, and over the Little Shoulder. Sleep at the patrol cabin if the mice haven't decided they own it. The weather had finally remembered it was summer again. The trail was dry, and the lodge poles made that hiss that is a mood and not a sound. I packed too much water like rookies do, and tied the rest to my back with a strap that cut into the spot where my previous life's stress had kept a hand for years. The ranger who posted the cabin log before me wrote in neat letters that they had seen no bear sign, had heard wolves in the middle distance, and had left a can of beans in the bear box with a Sharpie note, legal for rangers. Not for you, mice. The smell inside was old wood and dust and a thin small stain of rodent piss. I opened the shutters and let the basin show me its teeth. There was a map tacked to the wall where someone had used an old .22 round as a pushpin. Lines were drawn on it in wax pencil. The boardwalks we tell people are delicate. The invisible channels we tell ourselves don't move but do. The cabin had a second guest book tucked behind the regular one. It was made from a topographical map folded into quarters, and it said, "Look here if you must," and inside, in a hand I recognized, Calloway had written, "If you breathe steam in your sleep, leave. Red eyes in the morning are not your business here. If you wake and your boots are wet, don't put them on. That's not water. That's a map. If someone knocks and says your name, ask them for a ranger's favorite trail. If they say clear, they will also say the name of a river that doesn't exist. You won't notice at first. That's why I wrote this down. If you smell cinnamon, don't light a match. It's not inviting you to watch it burn. It's practicing. I did the thing 100,000 people do every year. I stood on a narrow wooden way laid across a thing that wants to eat, and I pretended it was normal because I was making a list. The Shoshone pools are a different color, the wind light enough to make the surface wear a dress. There was a black dragonfly that chose the spot at the corner of my mouth and insisted on falling in love with it. It came back 3 times. On the third, I shook my head, and it landed on the rail and stared at me out of 2 eyes that were actually thousands. It rubbed its hands together like a landlord. "Not on me," I said. It hopped once, and I looked to the right because the note in my pocket said, "If a raven looks left, look right." There was no raven. I looked right anyway. What I saw was a second boardwalk beside the first. I had walked here 6 times in 2 days. I had not seen it. It might not have been there yesterday. That's true. Trails get moved. Maintenance builds in the evening to avoid the press. But the rail was black and old and splintered with a kind of wear that comes from years of human knuckles. The sign at the fork said, "Loop." The arrows on both were wrong. Left. The rail looked new if you didn't let your eyes slide. Right? The bollard had 3 bolts. I did the thing you do. I reached into my pocket and felt the card and counted bolts like rosary beads. I took the right-hand boardwalk. It felt like biting down on aluminum for a moment. I didn't realize I had stopped breathing until my heart decided to kick the door from the inside and demand better. The surface of the nearest pool did not accept my reflection. It accepted the sky and a bird that wasn't there and a bison that was, standing hip-shot and softened by heat. I watched the bison because the card made me elegiac the second it's in my fingers. Sometimes you move like prayer, not because you believe, but because you want to borrow the shape of someone who does. I clapped. It didn't turn. "Hey, big guy," I said in my UHR bear voice. "We need a little space." It cocked its head. The fur on my arms stood up inch by inch like it had been laid against a charge. Bison are animals, and animals have manners. Things that are pretending to be bison Forget there are other directions their bodies can move. This one moved forward, not a step, a lean that lengthened like a shadow, like it could borrow distance by thinking about it. I walked backward without speaking. 1 minus 2 minus 3. It didn't uncock its head. It didn't blink. I counted my breaths and let my boot heel kiss each plank with the deliberate affection of someone who is trying to teach themselves to be careful in real time later. In the cabin, I used the pencil nub that lived on a string by the door to write in the regular. Log, trail maintenance, installed double board at West Loop. Right hand rail has 3 bolts. Left hand looks new. Recommend, right? I also wrote in the map log, something boy blue stood in the water and thought he was a pile of heat. That night, something knocked on the cabin door. It was a friendly knock, not wrong. Like someone with a cup of coffee didn't want to startle you. Hey, it said. My name. I lay still on the bunk and thought about cinnamon. I thought about favorite trails. I thought about the river that doesn't exist. Favorite trail, I said. Clear, they said, cheerful as static. Clear tonight. You should see Loneit was my place back when I didn't take a picture. Should have. Hey, can you hit the latch? I think you might have it backwards. Radio on my chest, hand on the spray. I stood up. The knock sounded friendlier by the second, like someone who would let you change lanes in town. It felt like humiliation to ask the next question. It felt like I had won something. What's your call sign? I asked, aiming at the place where the sound bunched. Sure, the voice said. I'm 161. We met, kid. Favorite trail, I said. It's clear, he said, but the syllables splayed like wire, not air. It's clear tonight. I didn't open the door. He knocked a while, not angry. And then he knocked on the window. And then he said my name like my mother says it, with the questions sewn in the middle. And then the knock went away like a fox in the morning. My boots were wet where I'd lined them up at the foot of the bunk. Not wet like dew. Wet like they had been washed and not dried. I emptied them carefully into a pan. The water ran like a map. The slosh made the contours. If I had poured it on the floor, I think it might have flowed to a place that isn't on any of ours. On the way out, I met a fisherman in a fedora whose eyes were ruined by sun. He had the look of someone who had come here to do his one thing, and then had not found the thing but stayed anyway, because leaving meant taking responsibility for the whole. He pointed at my boots and said, You see the falls. Which ones? He made a sound like he had mislaid the name, and then chose just to go without it. They're smaller in the morning, he said. And I wrote that down too, back at Mammoth. Calloway had his hat in his hands, and his jaw set in a way that made me wish for a second that rangers were the kind of crew that hugged. He wasn't looking at me, though. He was looking at the window where a yellow flyer had been taped to the inside with 2 strips of blue painter's tape that made it look gentle. Missing person. The name was a woman's. The photo showed her in a puffy jacket and a flat smile by a She had been seen last at Black Sand at dusk. The post-it stuck to the bottom said, in curling letters, found jewelry silver band, engraving on boardwalk. Please advise. Don't bag it, I said, and Calloway nodded. We need a sweep. 2 teams. Night, it's going to get fog. They put me with Roe because you do not put the new one with someone who is learning you and themselves simultaneously. We went in from the south again. It was 21 o'clock. The air slid between 45 and 40, like it was testing how many shirts we were wearing. The boardwalk side under us. Every plant in the drainage between pools had leaned toward the water, like it was a radio playing the song of itself. They had put a little tent over the jewelry on the boardwalk, like a feeble, sweet tarp for a raccoon. A plastic triangle with a clipped-on ID that said, "Marker only." Someone had written a note on the tent with a black pen, "Ring 2100. Black hair, silver jacket, last seen near Opal." "Why is it always Opal?" Ro said. "It has the prettiest name. Never trust the ones with pretty names." We circled the pools the way you circle an argument. Patient, redundant, changing only angle. I was listening for a name I hadn't even let myself think in the truck. I was not going to give the water something to lick. Ro put her hand on my sleeve when the fog came down the hill. "Too fast," she said, not into the radio but into my shoulder. "Lie flat if you hear that song." We were too early for gazebo music. We were not too early for an echo. "Val," someone said from the fog. Not a question. Not even a test. The way you call someone from a room away in a house you've lived in forever, knowing that they will hear and answer and come because you are two halves of one necessary task. Ro didn't look at me. She had the radio in her hand. She had not keyed it. "Val," the voice said, "look at the water. It has lights in it." Ro put her face very close to mine, like an angry mentor, and said, "Do not answer. If you see the ring again, do not touch it. If your hand moves like it wants to check, you let me break your finger. We good?" I nodded, because my mouth had its own business. The fog made me imagine the shape of a pavilion and then did not supply it. That's the problem with fog as an accomplice. It only gives you the outline and then asks you to do the rest. The voice said "Val" again, and then it said my name, because why not Tand? Then it said, in a false, rising cheer, "Found it." It floated up. It floated. Look, I counted my breath. I counted how much of the boardwalk was under my knees and how much under my boots. I saw the ring at the corner of my vision, glinting with the beam of rose light. "Do not bag," she said. And then, louder, speaking like a person who had to be heard above a generator. "Dispatch from Ranger Ro. No visuals. Audio contact with unknowns. Fog rolling in. Close black sand. We need a rope at the south gate," I had thought. Rope to pull someone out. She had meant rope to mark the boundary for the roof. The fog moved with purpose. It swung like a thing on hinges. It returned to the center. The gazebo music started from very far away and came forward like a parade that doesn't need permission. "Down," Ro said, and we went. The ring bumped against my boot heel. It did that thing where inanimate objects seem suddenly capable, like it had eyes and a schedule. I put the side of my face on the boardwalk because that is what the note said. I could see between the planks. The mud was a pale skim under there, like cake batter. There was handwriting I will only admit to in daylight. I closed my eyes and held the radio to my heart to turn the card into a shield. The music passed. Later. There's always a later if you do what you're told, I keep learning to admit. The fog floated into a different shape. We did not find the woman that night. The next morning, they found her downriver, in a side channel where the ground was more suggestion than honest. Her boots were on. The report said she had only one blister. The silver ring was not on her finger. Her jaw was set, like she had wanted to say something extremely banal at the very last second and had not had the time to finish it because she had been offered an answer in a voice that did not belong to her. They gave me a day off I did not want. I went down to Gardner and sat on a rock and watched pronghorn pretend to be delicate when they are actually ferocious. And I thought about the cardinal sins in this place. Hubris is old news. Pride is so hot it evaporates in midair. The sin here is always curiosity, dressed up as obedience. Back up at Norris. The maintenance tech in Waiters from my first night waved again at me from down a cut. He had the same coil of cable. It had the same kink in it. He had the same smile. "Watch your head after dark," he said. "Porcelain gets fog. You get rope yet?" "I saw it," I said. He tilted his head, playful, like a person who knows he is about to tell you the punchline and you will not like it. "Did you?" The first rule on the card says, if steam crosses the trail and you cannot smell sulfur or minerals, do not step through. There's a nasty little counterpart to that, learned later. If you smell cinnamon where cinnamon should not be, whatever you are smelling is not a thing. It is an intention. You cannot breathe an intention without making a promise. I made none. I backstepped away, and the tech smiled wider, the performance turning into a picture. And then he went to lay down his same line in the same groove his boots had worn 100 times, and he did not ripple the surface. The cable bent where it touched toe. God, that wasn't water. A tour bus had spat its load into the lot by the time I made it back to the truck. An older woman with a hat like a cake asked me how to get to the good waterfalls, and then asked me if the bears had schedules. People think animals belong to us because we own the words for them. People think the earth belongs to us because we own rope. Watch for signs, I said. They're repetitive on purpose. The ground is not your friend here. Oh, she said, disappointed. I thought you'd have a special answer. I do, I said. I just gave it to you. Ranger 161 went quiet on the net after that. You don't say someone is quiet on the net. You just notice when the person who says the clever thing, when the tension creaks, hasn't said it. Roe tried his phone. No answer. His partner tried the backcountry repeater. No answer. The truck he used was found in a pullout with a smeared coffee ring on the dash, and a logbook with 3 lines and an unfinished 4th. Black sand, 20. The thing about losing a person in a place like this is that you have to use the rules to decide how to break the rules. We went in where we were not supposed to, with waiters we had not requisitioned, with a rope that had been braided by a volunteer with the kind of hands that baked Christmas bread. We stepped off the boardwalk only where the engineer said we could, and only for as long as it took to move a human body length. And the whole time we said our names into our radios and asked each other for our favorite trails, like some kind of bizarre corporate retreat that had been designed by a child who had seen a diagram of ritual, but not attended one. The gazebo music started upwind. We lay down. I wanted to throw up, but my body forgot how. The voice that had knocked on my cabin door spoke from the far side of the loop. It had stolen casualness from someone who did not know how precious casualness is. Clear, it said, full and bright. Clear tonight, there's an answer. I learned then that I had not seen on the cards because nobody wanted to write it down. There's a line you can say if you absolutely must get something's attention, so hard that it looks at you and not the person it has already chosen. It's a violation. It's a hook in your own mouth, I said Calloway, into a piece of night. Had a roof in it, and I said it with the question in the middle, like my mother, when she knew I'd taken the car without permission, and I said it with the senior in my voice who had no right to be there at 3 weeks in. The roof turned its eyes. The music wobbled. The fog contracted like it was learning to be a throat. Rose's hand hit my shoulder so hard it made a sound like cloth becoming skin. Don't, she said. I know, I said, and then I did it again until I was saying it like a chant, which is a word for counting that you sing. The fog stopped moving. You don't think fog can do something as sudden as stop? It did, hey, a voice said from somewhere so nearby that it had to be under the boards. Don't embarrass yourself. Favorite trail, I said. There was a silence inside, a silence, and then the roof moved away. It did not go. It went. There's a difference. The ring bumped Rose's boot this time. Neither of us whispered. Neither of us said anything like, get it or don't. We opened our mouths and let the fog pass through without borrowing a shape from our teeth. We did not find 161 that night either. The morning after, we found his hat in a willow, the cheap elastic of its strap broken. The inside smelled like someone else. It is hard to carry into your day the fact of something wanting you. We like to think the land is indifferent. Indifference has mercy hidden in it. Want is exhausting. They gave me more day shifts. They framed it like a favor. It was a triage of morale. People who had been here longer than me took the radios at night. They started tapping the laminated cards in their pockets in a way that was a joke and a sacrament. Someone added a line to the back in ballpoint, and someone else traced it with a Sharpie, so it wouldn't wash away with sweat. If a raven looks left, look right. If a ranger says clear, that's not our weather. If you taste metal when you stand by porcelain, say your call sign into your wrist and count to 10. If you can't get to 10 without something saying your name, bite your tongue until you taste blood. Name the teeth you feel. They're yours. There are things you say inside your head when you don't want them to exist. I started cataloging the number of screws in a span of boardwalk, the color of the sky when the clouds tangle and look like hair, the recipe for biscuits my grandmother put in a church cookbook in 1980. I named my favorite trail without being asked. I wrote it on the inside of my wrist in map pencil that went away when you got wet. In late September, when the elk were bugling like metal pipes being cut with a hacksaw. I got sent down to the old faithful area again. The schedule had a gap. The clipboard in the backcountry office had my name written in stern Sharpie beside a line that said, close loop if music. The day was long and bright in a way that makes you think daylight is smug. I did the tour. I did the spiel. I said all the words that mean, we do this so when you come back in 50 years with your granddaughter, you do not point to a hole and say, there used to be something here and we took it. I told a man that the earth doesn't perform for us, and he told me that that is literally the point of a park. And I wrote his plate down and then drew a tiny heart beside it to remind myself to forgive something eventually. At 1810, on the Biscuit Basin Boardwalk, I saw a group coming toward me in matching ponchos. shoulder to shoulder, so their hoods touched like one big hood. It wasn't raining. The fabric did not move, and I realized later that the arms were inside, or that there were the number, didn't matter. I stepped off the boardwalk, because the note said to do that. I let them pass. I looked for mouths. I covered my own with my glove anyway. I closed my eyes. When I opened them, they had moved measuredly on. The boards had not creaked. There are 100 tiny guardians in this place that do not care if you sing their names or swallow them. There are things that enforce rules by being in love with the safety of their own existence. The poncho thing was not one of them. It was enforcement of a different sort, a demonstration, a marching band that will not allow anything out of step. That night, on the way back to the truck, I heard a fox laugh. It is a ridiculous sound. It sounds like a sharp intake of breath, and then a cough, and then a scream that forgot its own punchline. I laughed too, because I am a stupid animal who likes patterns. A small shape blinked on the boardwalk ahead, neon eyes scampering like someone had tied their flashlight to a drunk idea. Don't, I told myself, and then I did. I stopped, and then I made myself remember. Foxes don't like steam. There was no fox. There was a place that wanted to put a fox there, so I would put my foot in it. I walked slow and said my call sign under my breath, and I recited the recipe for biscuits again because I did not have anyone else's favorite trail in my mouth, and I was going to use what I had. 2 cups flour, 1 teaspoon salt. Do not need, do not need, do not. I did not need. The idea of a fox returned to whatever corner of the world ideas go when they find no purchase, like it had been told to stand up and sit down at the same time. The winter came down like a garage door. The park does a false closing in October, when the human beings go does a real closing in January, when even the elk look personally offended. I stayed on purpose. By then the rules had the feel of muscle memory, and the cards had been copied. The corners rounded by a volunteer who had taken a shine to the way our hands wanted a thing to hold. I will tell you there is a thing at Norris that lives under the boardwalk and eats the name clear when you hold it in your teeth. I will tell you that because nobody took a picture, and the ones who saw it alone no longer speak in the voice they brought with them to the job. If the park has a guardian, it is not a person. It is a pattern. It is a way of stepping. It is the knowledge that if you line up 7 stars in a scoop and you count 8, what you are actually doing is placing yourself on the number line where you do not belong. One night in February, when the temperature did not climb above 0 even at noon, the radio woke up like a struck bell. A snowmachener had gone off trail near Madison. Law enforcement asked for a ranger because the line he left behind had done something that made the old ones frown. The line had made a choice, and then changed its mind, and then chosen again, and then vanished into a place where the space between trees was too tight for anything with a throttle. You do not go into thermal areas on a snow machine. You do not go into anywhere soft in the dark. We did. Ro and I walked on snowshoes, and the world had been compressed into a series of squeaks and the sound my own. Blood makes when it resents being far from the heart. The snow was a card read wrong side up. The stars were ridiculous, and the Big Dipper had 7 because it was being polite. And the coyote tracks moved in couples and then moved apart like a song had stopped and started again. We found the machine. It sat tilted at an angle a person can avoid by dying earlier. Call for you. Ro said, and handed me the radio like it was a loaf of bread, still warm enough to sweat through the bag. 278, I said. Don't say your name, the static said. I didn't. Favorite trail, it said. And there it was, the test that was not a test, coming from a place that should have had nothing to say to me. Tell me your favorite trail. It wasn't our gear. The voice had a bright ribbon tied on it like a market vegetable. Highlight, I said, because the truth is sometimes talisman. In April, when the ice has given a few inches but not enough. Clear tonight, it said, after a beat, with a warmth that would have fooled me in October and only made me tired in February. Snowing, I said. It's clear, it said, like we had a disagreement about what an eye is for. Listen, I said, to the snow machine there, and the voice on the radio, and the place where the trail changed color around a new shadow. You can speak like us, but we do not perform for you. If you say my name, I will say yours. You should be careful about that. You don't know me, it said, and suddenly it wasn't pretending to be the dispatcher. It was an older voice, stricter, the tone they use on signs. I did not know it, and then I did. It was the voice that had knocked on the cabin, the one that had learned to say clear like it was a temperature. It was the gazebo's roof. I lay down. I put my whole body against the snow that had been a boardwalk once in a story. I did not change shape. Maybe that's what it wanted. Ro lay down too. We were two rangers on our bellies in the dark, with our faces against the cold and our radios against our ribs. The machine steamed, a little like a ridiculous animal. The voice spoke with impatience, and then it stopped, and then it moved, not moved, went because the sound changes when a thing learns, and it had learned our rules too. Calloway came back in April. That's not accurate. His voice came back. It called traffic stops on the Law Channel and asked for weather on the Fire Channel and told a volunteer to leave a trail camera on a pole that hadn't been there when we kicked the snow off it. We treated it like any other hazardous condition. We put a sign on the door of the dispatch room. Do not acknowledge. We made a new line on the card. If someone says your name on the radio and you don't know them, key for 2 seconds, say your call sign and on air. Ask for favorite trail. If they say, clear, leave your radio on the floor and walk away. We left the radios on the floor and walked away. So often the dirt made rings in the shape of circles you can study later. We made rituals out of toilets and coffee and the way we pressed our hands to the heater grates. We made weather of our voices and became, in time, caretakers of an institution that had never needed us and will not need us when our names dissolve. I still have the card. The paper one ripped somewhere in my first winter and made a little lightning shape down the middle of a line I love. The laminated one curls where it kisses my chest. I hold them in my hands and feel the way the heat takes them, and I tell myself the truth the park tells me when I am walking alone on a boardwalk, at a time of night when even the owls pretend not to see. This is not a job about saving people. It is a job about making rules into ropes. Sometimes they pull, sometimes they burn. Sometimes they let you tie them into the shape of a gazebo and trick the roof into thinking it is the floor. If you come here and a ranger tells you not to step off the boardwalk, please know they are not afraid you will hurt the ground. The ground hurts just fine. They are telling you that this is a place with a mouth, and it is beautiful, and it is old, and it does not care about our names. If you hear yours, do not answer. If you must say something because silence sounds like permission, say these instead. Call sign, location, favorite trail, the weather. The bolts on the bollard say, I am on air. Say it into your shoulder. Say it with your breath pressed into a thing made for listening. And if the gazebo music comes, lie down and let it look for you and not find you because you have learned how to be a floor. And if someone knocks on your door at night in a cabin with a map tacked up where the river that doesn't exist has worn a mark, and they ask in the friendliest possible voice for you to let them in, ask one question first. Do not open the door. Do not walk toward it. Put your hand on the card. Feel the heat making it soft and mortal and temporary. Ask them, with the weight of every ranger who stood without moving when the fog said come, for the only answer that ever tells you what you need to know. Ask them, what's your favorite trail? If they say clear, pull the blanket over your head, count to 10, bite your tongue, name your teeth, they are yours. If they say Highlight or Mist Creek or the stretch near the flats where the ravens have learned to open zippers, then you say yours. And you say it with the relief that feels like heat after a long cold, and you make coffee. And this is important. You do not add cinnamon. Not out there, not here, not ever. Not when the water outside is singing a song with no words, and your video from the day looks like you caught light, making a promise and keeping it. I am still new. Months do not make you old here the way years do elsewhere. But I have learned the weight of rope in my pocket. I have learned the smell of steam that doesn't want to be read. I have learned that bison are gentle until they aren't, and that anything that tilts its head to borrow your distance is not what it is trying to be. And I have learned a rule I will not write on any card, because what if someone reads it and thinks it is a riddle, and what if they try to answer? If you count more than 7 stars inside the Big Dipper, it's not a night for your name. It's a night for numbers. Count your breaths. Count the screws. Count the steps to the truck. Do not stop counting until you feel the heater on your shins and the door closed like a book and the radio against your chest. Key for 2 seconds. Say on air. Do not say your name. Say I am here.